Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you to Tuesday's edition of End of the Age. I'm Dave Robbins with End Time Ministries. I want to talk to you today about the current turmoil in the United States. Now, I know a lot of you have to feel the unrest in the United States. There are riots. There is the hatred towards the police. The news media, I mean Hollywood and politicians attacking President Trump, even to the point where I heard that, and many of you probably heard this, a Democratic state senator in Missouri actually posted that she hopes that President Trump would be assassinated. Now that's pretty bad. And you know, you heard of the lady who held up a beheaded doll that looked like President Trump and things like that. How can we get to the point where it's that bad that we would have public figures wanting to kill the president? I mean, that's pretty bad in the United States, and they're not prosecuted for that. How would it get that bad? Have you asked yourself that lately? I know it's on everybody's mind. So have you asked yourself, why all the strife? Why the hatred? Why the fighting? Why can't we just get past it all? And we live in the greatest nation on the earth. Why so much turmoil right now? Well, that's the reason for my program today. And I know that we're going on new programming or new networks all the time. And so we have to kind of reiterate what's really going on. And instead of just focusing on one subject today, I'm going to cover a lot of subjects because we're trying to educate everybody and give the big picture. Sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees. So you got to step back, look at the big picture and say, okay, what's going on here? I need to understand this because it's on every news station. It's on the front of every newspaper. It's on every website. Riots and this, that, and the other's going on. The girl in Charlottesville that just got killed and somebody hit her with a vehicle. I mean, come on, everybody. This is getting a little out of hand. Why? Well, consider this. This is the big picture. There is a select group of people in this world that are endeavoring to establish a socialistic world government. Now, for decades, they really tried to hide it. Right now, they're not even trying to hide it really anymore. I mean, if you study, do a little bit of research, you can see what I'm saying is true. They're trying to establish a world government in the earth today where all nations would yield up their sovereignty, do away with their borders, and we would have a world community that answers to a one world government. That's their goal. Even both there are Republicans and Democrats and people who you would never know if I called their name. Never heard of them before. They've worked together really for decades to put all the pieces, the little pieces to the puzzle in place in an effort really to control every aspect of your life and my life, right down to how much electricity you'll use, how much food you consume, and what kind of food you'll consume, what you teach your kids in school, because they're trying to indoctrinate them for the next generation to bring on global citizens, so they're training them from being a young child. and also what you do with your money, even to the point of they would love to control what you think. Hate crimes are all about thought control. And so there are people who are trying to establish a world government on the earth today. And you say, well, what's that got to do with us? Why the unrest like you're talking about? Well, up until now, 2017, the United States, among others, among most nations on the earth, but the United States really has been one of the driving forces behind this effort. Now you say, well, hold on right there, Dave. Because we're talking about the United States of America, the land of the free, the home of the brave. I totally agree with all that. Believe me, I'm a patriot. I love America. But that does not mean everybody living here is a patriot or loves America. If you understand, there is a portion of people who would love to implement socialism here in this country and to yield up our sovereignty to this one world governing body. Let's just face the facts. So you do understand, folks, that the United Nations, which is in essence, the most recognizable world governing body on the earth today. There are many others, the World Health Organization, World Trade Organization, International Criminal Court, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. They're all designed to be part of this one world governing body. But the United Nations is the most recognizable one, and it is located in New York on property. A lot of people, I've asked that people in Bible studies for years. We've asked them in our prophecy conferences, and they say, United Nations, that's in Europe somewhere. Well, part of the world governing body's guts is in Europe, but the headquarters for that is in New York, and it's located on property that was donated by an American, David Rockefeller. So there are people who are devoted to the establishment of a world governing body here in the United States. Now, like I said before, the United Nations is the most recognizable global governing organization. There are many others, but you can at least wrap your mind around the United Nations, or can you? Because you were never taught, in school we were taught that the United Nations was the last great humanitarian organization hoped for peace on earth. The United Nations, the hope would that we were sold in school was that rather than nations going to war with each other, that we would go to the United Nations and talk it out. In essence, that's what you were sold in school. This humanitarian organization that will feed the poor and, go into these catastrophic situations and help people. And they do a little bit of that, but at the end of the day, the United Nations, it was originally designed, the original charter was written by a convicted communist spy. So think about that. The United Nations, located on American soil, donated to them by David Rockefeller. Their charter, their constitution that they function by, was written by a convicted communist spy on purpose, and his name was Alger Hiss. Not one word of that charter has ever changed from the day it was written in late 1945, late 1944, early 45. Not one word has changed from that day to this. So the United Nations was designed to be a socialistic world government. I've been there many times, and there's no mention of God. I mean, they have a room where you can go in and meditate. Very weird. They believe everybody somewhat worships this same being. They call him different names. Just totally humanistic. But it was designed from its inception to be a socialistic one world governing body, and the United States had a huge part in that, and it's been supported by the establishment here in the United States, as well as other globalists here in the United States for the last 70 plus years. And many of you, if you follow this stuff at all, you know what I'm talking about. The establishment here in the United States, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Brookings Institute, one of the number one think tanks in the United States, the Federal Reserve here in the United States. It's all part of the establishment here. And they're all linked to this world governing body they're trying to establish. And it's here in the United States. So that's overseas in China and communist Russia. No. It's here in the United States. There are people who would love to implement socialism, socialistic principles here in the United States. That's what I'm saying. I'm stepping back, looking at the big picture. Why all the unrest, the riots, all this other mess going on here in the United States? Why is that? We are rife with this stuff. Why? Because there is an entity. Now, this is my opinion, and I believe I could prove it. Yeah, I mean, if you do your research and everything, there's an entity that's that up until for the last 70 plus years have been trying to implement a world governing body in the world and with its fingers here in the United States. Now, here is where much of the conflict comes from. Because you can get caught up in Charlottesville and all these other different places these riots are happening and really not know what's going on. So, in this last election, enough Americans got tired of being bullied by people. I mean, okay, you say bullied. What do you mean by that? Obamacare. Did anybody have to pay a penalty for not buying Obamacare? It was forced upon you. And they said, you don't buy it, you got to pay a penalty. So in my mind, that's bullying. I didn't go out and try to buy Obamacare. They said, you're going to do it or else. So enough Americans got tired of being bullied in this last election by people who were trying to take away our freedoms and implement socialistic principles here in the United States, and voted in a person who was against the establishment. You say, well, you're right here we go on pro-Donald Trump. I don't care who it was. Forget, let's take Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the president, but it's irrelevant of color, of where they come from, their background. I'm saying we voted in a person who was against the establishment, and I'm going to show you that throughout the rest of my program, and why there might be so much unrest. And here in the United States, he was against the establishment here in the United States and the world government. So remember, they were trying to establish this for 70 plus years now, almost really a century. And the United States was the main proponent of that in many ways. And yet, in the end of 2016, November the 8th, the United States voted in a person who is against it. So, who is that? Obviously, President Donald Trump. So, the reason now you're kind of getting the big picture. Somebody comes along and thumbs their nose at it. So, the reason for a lot of the conflict, in my mind, not all of the conflict, mind you. I understand that there are things going on, obviously, like let's say down here in Houston, they got the floods. And there are the policemen and different rescuers are trying to fight looters. Okay, that stuff happens. That stuff just happens, okay? Now, I don't think that people were paid to go in and protest and this, that, and the other. Some of that stuff, there's just a section of society that would go into a situation like that and try to loot people's homes. I mean, the degenerate of society, let's just say that. So I'm saying not all conflict, but the conflict we've been watching in the news, all these riots and stuff, people wanting to get up and give a speech, and people show up and kind of try to beat them up or this, that, and the other. What's really going on here? Well, but a lot of this conflict, just because Donald Trump was elected president, it does not mean that the establishment and others who they were entrenched here in the United States, who want to see the United States fully under the reign of a world government, that they're simply just going to say, well, we lost, let's throw up our hands and go away. Do you think that happened? No, absolutely not. They're still here. These groups of lobbyists, of globalists, liberal internationalists, one-worlders, or whatever you want to call them, they're still here trying to see their plan through. Believe me. And they have a lot of money, and they have a loud voice. They own the media. So you wonder, that's one of the main things. You wonder why Donald Trump came out just fighting the media. You're fake news and this, that, and the other. He knows who owns the media and what they would try to do to him when he started trying to implement some of his principles. So you wonder why the media owned by the establishment is coming at him so hard. It's because he's thumbing his nose at the establishment and the world governing bodies and things they're trying to do. So now you can kind of get the picture of what's really going on here. So the only way for them to realize this world government is to get Donald Trump out of the way, either by impeaching him, getting him out of office, or something worse than that, obviously, would be horrible. But I'm telling you, there are people that have the mindset to do stuff like that, believe me. So here's my question today on today's program. Bible prophecy tells us that the United States will not be involved in this world government in the end time. So for 70 plus years, or about a century now, they've been working for this world government. And we know from the prophecies of the Bible that the United States is not going to be involved, but yet up till now we've been one of the main proponents of it. So is it possible that Donald Trump is fulfilling Bible prophecy by standing against the establishment in the United States and the world government? Is it time for us to pull out of it? So let's talk about it, because like I said, we're always going on new networks, and I want to make sure everybody understands what the Bible has to say about this stuff, rather than, me sounding like I'm on CNN or Fox News. Let's make sure we know what the Bible says, and then I'll get off into it. Because I want to know, what's the unrest here? Why is there such an upheaval right now, and everybody's attacking the president and this, that, and the other? Because there are people here trying to establish a world government and trying to implement socialistic principles here in the United States, and we have a president that's standing against that, and they hate his guts. So, what's the Bible say about all this? Well, the Bible provides us with many accounts in which a heathen king was used by God. If you consider Pharaoh, God hardened his heart, softened his heart, hardened his heart, softened his heart. He eventually ended up releasing the children of Israel. King Cyrus ended up paying for the building of the second temple. A heathen king paid lock, stock, and barrel for the building of the second temple when Zerubbabel went back from Babylonian captivity and many of the Israelis went back to build the second temple. A heathen king paid for the whole thing. Ahasuerus extended his golden scepter to Queen Esther. You remember the story? Allowing the Jews were all going to be put to death because of a decree that the king had made, unbeknownst to him that Esther was a Jew. He made a decree against them that they would have to be put to death. And the sentence, because she went before the king extended his golden scepter, and she had to, and he made another decree that said on that day when they were supposed to be plundered by the people of his kingdom, that they could resist and fight back against that. And they still commemorate that day today. The Jews still celebrate the celebration of Purim. They celebrate that today because of that. God used a heathen king to protect the Jews and to allow them to allow really salvation for them. So God has used heathen kings down through time and Pharaoh, this, that, and the other, to make sure his will was done. So the Bible says in the near future that when the world government's established, the United States will not be part of that. So is it possible that Donald Trump, whether he's a Christian, whatever he is, or a Christian or not, is being used, the question, is being used to get the United States out of the world government? So let's talk about it. You say, world government, where's that at? I'm brand new listening to the program. Where's world government found in the Bible? Well, I'm going to start back in Daniel 7 real quick, and then I'll get to Revelation chapter 13. The world government and Bible prophecy, Daniel 7, 1 through 9, provides us with a view of modern nations that would be on the earth when Jesus returns to set up His kingdom on the earth, which is just ahead of us now. We're living in the end time. I can prove that using just about any prophecy in the Bible. We're living in the end time. The second coming is just ahead of us now. The Bible says in Daniel 7 that these nations would be on the earth at that point. So it says this, Daniel chapter 7, verse 1 through 8. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heavens strove upon the great sea, and four great beasts came up out of the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion, and it had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man. And a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second like unto a bear. And it raised itself up on one side. It had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh. After this I saw, and lo, a third beast, another beast, like a leopard, which had upon the back 4 wings of a fowl. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. And this I saw in the night visions. And behold, a 4th beast, dreadful, terrible, strong exceedingly. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. I considered the horns. And behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. So, in this, without taking time to prove all of this, the lion is Great Britain, the eagle's wings are the United States, the bear is Russia, the 4-headed leopard is Germany, and the 10-horned beast is the European Union, which will eventually bring about the 10 nations that will form an allegiance with the Antichrist just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now, this prophecy was written 2,500 years ago, long before any of these nations ever came into existence, or these entities. And so it's a prophecy about modern nations, nations that will be on the earth at the second coming of Jesus Christ. How do we know that these nations will be here at the time of the second coming? Verse 9 tells us, Daniel said, and I beheld till the thrones were cast down. It tells later on in Daniel 7 that these beasts are symbolic of nations. Remember, I said the lion is Great Britain. The eagle's wings are America. And so it says, Daniel said, I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flames, and his wheels as a burning fire. So this is giving a view right here of his second coming, when he's going to tear down human government and set up his government here on the earth. And so we know that these nations will be on the earth at the time of the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now, we're going to jump forward 650 years to Revelation chapter 13, verse 1 and 2. These scriptures provide us with a symbolic view of the end-time world government. So Revelation 13, 1 and 2 states this, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. There's the leopard again in Daniel 7, brought forward 650 years. And his feet were as the feet of the bear. His mouth is the mouth of the lion. And the dragon gave him his seat, power, and great authority. So, again, here's the same beast brought all the way forward. John and Daniel never talked to each other. They lived 650 years apart. So, in John's vision in Revelation 13, the body of this beast is a combo beast. Daniel 7, they're all four separate beasts. Revelation 13, they're all combined into a world-governing body. So, the body of the leopard, it says it had the body of the leopard, that's Germany again. The feet of the bear, Russia. Mouth of the lion, Great Britain. The 10-horned beast, again, that's the European Union, and the 10 nations that will form an allegiance with the Antichrist just prior to the second coming of Jesus. So what's missing here? Well, it's the eagle's wings, the United States. So the question is, what happens to the United States? If it's not mentioned, if it's mentioned in Daniel 7 but not in Revelation 13, what happens to the United States? Well, we know from these set of scriptures that the United States will not be involved in the world governing body. That's what I'm talking about here with Donald Trump. Could he be a fulfillment of prophecy, pulling the United States out of this world governing body? Revelation 12:14 tells us what happens with the United States. What's our role in the end time? Because we're the most dominant nation on earth. Surely there's got to be a role for us in the end time. Well, Revelation 12:14 tells us what that is. It says, and to the woman, which in that chapter, Revelation 12 is Israel, were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, which is the nation of Israel, where she is nourished for times, and half a time from the face of the serpent. What does that mean? It means during the time of the Great Tribulation, Israel will be protected by the United States all the way to the end. And it lets us know that the United States is not mentioned in that world governing body. Could Donald Trump be part of a fulfillment of this prophecy? Let's talk about it when we come back.
Through the years, we have seen God perform miracle after miracle at End Time Ministries, and we are trusting God for another season of miracles this summer. So we decided that we wanted to share our miraculous story and boost your faith by offering you one of our newest DVDs titled The Miracle Called End Time for free with any purchase of $29 or more. To request your copy, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and mention the code MIRACLE or order online at endtime.com.
Most people have dreamed of someday walking on the ground where Jesus walked over 2,000 years ago. You don't have to wait any longer. Make this the year for your life-changing experience. This is your official invitation to join Judy and me for our 2017 Fall End Time Prophecy Tour. The trip of a lifetime is a severe understatement. If you could travel to any place on earth, your first choice should definitely be the Holy Land. There is simply no other place like it. Call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 for more information. Ask to speak to Holly or Jana about the tour.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archives button.
So now you can kind of see why I wanted to do this program today. Because knowing Bible prophecy and knowing that the United States will not be part of this world governing body, what would you do if you were part of this world governing body, you totally supported it, and yet one member wanted to break off? You would try to blackball them. You would try to threaten them. You would do anything you could to keep them part of, especially if they were your strongest member. You felt like you had to have them on board to have this world government structure that you had helped to create. And then somebody comes along, gets elected the leader of their country, and then says, we're pulling out of here. What would you think? Well, now you can put yourself in the mind of the global leaders that have attacked Donald Trump as a result of some of the things that he's done. Emmanuel Macron, Angela Merkel, I mean, you name it, Vladimir Putin, everybody who's involved in this, they've all said, I can't believe, the leader of the International Monetary Fund, I can't believe Donald Trump. This is going to be horrible. The United States will collapse, blah, blah, blah. They've got to stay part of this world governing body, in essence, is what they're saying. And so now you can see, in my mind, it's kind of a precursor as to what will happen during the Great Tribulation. Anybody who will not want to conform to this one world governing body, they're going to blackball them. That we know that the Antichrist is going to give everybody on earth their own unique identification number. Without that number, you're not going to be able to buy or sell. You're going to be economically sanctioned if you don't want to play ball with the Antichrist and his one world governing body. We're kind of seeing that on a dialed back scale right now, but we're kind of seeing a precursor to it because it's what they're doing to Donald Trump. He come along, he got elected president of the United States. He was one of the major players in this world governing body, and then he says, I'm gonna pull out of the climate agreement, and I'm gonna build a wall instead of do away with my borders. And they were screaming to high heaven. Why? Because he doesn't want to conform to the edicts of this one world governing body. And they thought that the United States was on board because for 70 plus years now, or I keep saying that, I should say beyond that really, for about a century now, they've been trying to establish this. And now that they've just about got it all put together, and I promise you, that's what this recent election was all about, moving towards the process of globalization or away, moving towards further integration into this one world governing body or away from it. Really, in essence, that's what this last election was all about. So let's talk about some of the ways that Trump has thumbed his nose at this world governing body, because you want to know why there's such unrest in the United States right now. And they're attacking Donald Trump's wife's shoes. I mean, it's getting that bad. And I've heard that if you can't beat a person in politics, if you can't touch them, you can't prove why they're wrong, this, that, and the other, that you will attack their character. You start attacking everything about them because you don't have a base to stand on. You don't have any foundation to your political side, so you've got to attack the person, their character, and everything else. So at the end of the day, regardless of the fact that it's Trump, I'm talking about the President of the United States who, in this time of prophetic fulfillment, we know there's a world government established. The Bible says there will be. It's here. And the Bible also says that the United States will not be part of that. Now we have somebody standing in the face of this and saying, no. So you wonder why the unrest. It's because there's still this huge faction of people in the United States that were absolutely pro-world government. I mean, believe me, they were pro-implementing socialism here in the United States. Big government, socialism, socialistic principles, progressive. Hillary Clinton said she was a progressive. Bernie Sanders, I'm a socialist, democratic socialist. He was not trying to hide anything. So they were absolutely for this. Donald Trump was against it. It's really what this last election was all about. People got tired of being bullied, so they elected Trump. I mean, let's just face it. So at the end of the day, you want to know the unrest? It's because all of these people who still believe in this world government that are still here in the United States, they're trying to dismantle Donald Trump and to take him down. Is everything he does perfect? Absolutely not. No, there's not one man on earth that you could put in there that would do everything perfect. I'm talking about looking at the big picture. Why the unrest in the United States? It's because there are people pushing us into the world government, and there are people that are trying to pull us out of it. And we're feeling that back and forth in the United States right now. Think about it. So let's talk about some of the things Donald Trump has done. Trump is against globalization. Look at the recent election. And here's why we're doing this. Knowing that the world, that a world government is prophesied in the near future, one area that we followed very closely is, and continually do, is the process of, the ongoing process of globalization, or moving towards a world government. Because people trying to implement world governing schemes here in the United States, that hasn't stopped overnight. Boom. That hasn't. And so consequently, we keep a very close eye on that, because this is our country. And like I said, I'm a patriot. Irvin Baxter's a patriot. The people that work here, we love America. And so at the end of the day, we watch this stuff. Number one, from a prophetic standpoint, because world government, the Bible says there's going to be one. And we know that there's a huge faction here in the United States pushing for it. So the recent election, in many ways, obviously set the course of the United States on a path toward dissension from this prophesied world government. We watched, intricately what Donald Trump was saying. Is he going to lead us into a world government? Is he going to lead us away? Because we know, because of all the prophecy that's really converging at the same time right now, that somebody had to come along and has to pull, somehow or another, we were not going to be involved in a world government. So we either had to elect a president that was going to pull us out, or something was going to happen to the guy that was elected and somebody else would get in. We didn't know. But at the end of the day, we were watching. What's this guy saying? What's he going to do? So we really were watching it close, and to see what's going to happen. Well, if everyone really understood the prophecies concerning the future global political authority, the world government, the entire election really could have been determined on that one issue. If they understood that there's going to be a world government, is this person going to take us into it or pull us out? And yes, obviously one candidate was vehemently opposed to globalization. Hey, I'm going to build a wall. I'm not going to open our borders. And the other one supported it in every way, and was going to move us. If the other side, let's say, would have got elected, we'd have headed straight into the arms of world government. That's where we were headed in the previous administration, and this one would have been, the other one that would have got elected, or could have got elected, would have been that administration on steroids. Let's just say that like that. So, the process of globalization, the one that got elected, pulling us out of that. Listen to his campaign speeches. He was all against globalization. We're going to build a wall. And those who support world government are for open borders, letting people just move free and to and fro. This global society. And they don't want anybody building walls. You understand what the big deal is now, that people saying, oh, I can't believe the United States is going to build walls. Those people believe in a world government. That's why the leaders of the world have been so against Donald Trump wanting to build a wall. I can't believe it. You're going against the process of globalization and open borders, this world government we're trying to create. And you understand the back and forth. So it creates turmoil and conflict. That's a lot of the unrest that you feel right now in the United States. Also, Trump moving the U.S. Embassy. The global leaders cannot comprehend. They are vehemently opposed to Donald Trump moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, because the international community has not recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. They never have. And so they can't believe that the leader of the United States would do that. So you say, well, hold on a minute. Trump signed a deal, the waiver, saying that he wouldn't move the embassy at this time. Yes, but just over the last few days, the Jared Kushner, Jason Greenblatt, and the team that Trump sent over there to reestablish the peace negotiations, they talked about moving the embassy. The Times of Israel reports that the Trump team and Netanyahu, on in an effort to renew talks on they renewed the talks on the U.S. Embassy move to Jerusalem just over the last few days. Senior White House advisor Jared Kushner, obviously the peace envoy Jason Greenblatt, and the Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategy Dina Powell met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Thursday, just a few days ago, as part of a visit to the region in a bid to revive the Palestinian peace efforts. During that, and it was a very strategic move on Trump's part, why he didn't move the embassy in the first 6 months. So listen at this. During the meeting, the embassy move was brought up by both sides as part of a productive, broad conversation about a number of issues, and which was we know that because of a U.S. source familiar with the discussions told everyone on Sunday, declining to reveal the specifics of the discussion. What come of that is they said, needless to say, the administration's policy is not when, but if. So they still are going to move it. So it's not a question of when will we, but if. And so, no, it's when will we, not if. And so when Trump signed the waiver, the White House officials said that moving the embassy at this stage could jeopardize the efforts to bring the two sides together. So remember, they're working on a peace agreement. And they said that if we move the embassy now, it wasn't because of, from President Obama all the way back, several decades, they signed waivers back and said, hey, we can't move the embassy right now because of national security risks. But that's not why Trump didn't do it. He didn't do it because he wants to bring the two sides together for a peace agreement. And here's why. Israel captured East Jerusalem and the West Bank from Jordan during the 1967 Six Days War and later annexed Jerusalem into Israel. A move that was never recognized by the international community. Israel declared the city, Jerusalem, its undivided capital, but the Palestinians claim East Jerusalem as the capital of a future Palestinian city. So they knew that moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem would be seen as endorsing Israel's claim to the city and rejecting the Palestinians. So the countries with ties to Israel typically place their embassies in Tel Aviv. Some have consulates in Jerusalem. The U.S. says that its policy on Jerusalem hasn't changed and that Jerusalem's status must be negotiated between Israel and the Palestinians. So they're still going to move the embassy. They just talked about it over the last few days. But they didn't want to tip their hand when talking about the peace agreement. They said, well, we can't just put it there now because the Palestinians will think we're all for Israel. And that's what they're trying to do.
Jesus prophesied two specific things would occur right before his second coming. In this lesson, this generation shall not pass. Irvin Baxter discloses what those two things are and what will happen. He also proves they are in the process of coming to pass right now. Are we the generation that shall not pass until the promise of Jesus' second coming is fulfilled? To find out, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Or order online at endtime.com.
Through the years, we have seen God perform miracle after miracle at End Time Ministries, and we are trusting God for another season of miracles this summer. So we decided that we wanted to share our miraculous story and boost your faith by offering you one of our newest DVDs titled The Miracle Called End Time for free with any purchase of $29 or more. To request your copy, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and mention the code MIRACLE or order online at endtime.com.
I honestly, I wish I had about another 2 hours to go over the rest of this stuff. I got so many points because Trump has done so much to pull us out of this world governing body, and let's just face it, they hate him because the United States obviously is one of the major players in it. And now the President of the United States is saying, I pretty much don't want anything to do with it. And so they can't believe it. One of the, well, let's talk about global warming. And that's kind of one of my, I just, it's such a big hoax. And it's the United Nations. It's one of their main efforts to redistribute the wealth of the world. So global warming, the hoax. And Donald Trump has come out and said it's a joke. It's a hoax, and I know it is. And the United Nations, they cannot stand him for that. Because obviously President Obama and all the rest of them, and the Bushes, they were all into it. Clinton, they had all bought into it, lock, stock, and barrel. Donald Trump comes along and says, no. And it's one of the United Nations, which is a socialistic entity. One of the major platforms of socialism is wealth redistribution. Well, global warming is a climate change scam for the United Nations, this world governing body, to redistribute the wealth of the world because it's socialism. So let's talk about it, because Donald Trump is opposed to it, and they can't stand it. Otmar Edenhofer is a UN, or was a UN, International Panel on Climate Change official. And he stated this: but one must say clearly that we distribute de facto the world's wealth by climate policy. It's not about the climate. We're redistributing the planet's wealth. Obviously, owners of coal and oil will not be enthusiastic about it. One has to free oneself from the illusion that international climate policy is environmental policy. This has nothing to do with the environmental policy anymore. This was a guy who was with the International Panel on Climate Change, funded by the United Nations. Doesn't have anything to do with the environmental policy. They're redistributing the wealth of the world by this climate change hoax. Emma Brindle, a climate justice campaigner coordinator for Friends of the Earth, stated this: a climate change response must have at its heart a redistribution of wealth and resources. Okay, so the United Nations, like I said, their global warming hoax is all about redistributing the wealth of the world. They've got socialism on the mind. And so that's what they're wanting to do. Well, then, one of the main players on the world governing stage, which has been the United States. Now, we've all been told, hey, we signed a Declaration of Independence and we're all about, sovereignty and protecting our sovereignty and this, that, and the other. That's what the patriots believe in. That's not what people who believe in a world government, they are totally diametrically opposed to that. So somebody who believes in nationalism, protecting our borders, build a wall, they believe they're a patriot. We're America first. But then somebody who comes along and says, no, we need to tear down our borders, let in refugees from all over creation, illegal immigrants, whoever, and forget about protecting our borders and let's yield up our sovereignty to this one world governing body. Would you consider them a patriot? No. So, the global warming hoax. United Nations is all for it. Donald Trump comes along and says, that's crazy. It's a hoax. On December 30th, 2015, Donald Trump told the crowd at a rally in Hilton Head, South Carolina. Obama's talking about all of this with the global warming, and a lot of it, it's just a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry, okay? And it's a hoax, a lot of it. Donald Trump stated this. Now, you wonder why these world governing leaders and things in the United States are opposed to him. You feel, we, the United States citizens, are feeling this back and forth. People trying to drag us into this world governing body, and the President of the United States trying to pull us out. We can feel that. Why is there protesters at every time he speaks, and every word he says, the media is on him? Why? Because there are people, the establishment owns the media. So you think they're not going to be against Donald Trump? And the funny thing is, he knew it coming into office. That's why he started saying fake news, and tearing them down. He had to do that. He did all that on purpose. Because he knew if he was going to stand in the face of all the big boys, he'd have to do that. So, Then, in an energy policy speech in North Dakota on May 26, 2016, Trump stated, rescind all the job-destroying Obamacare executive actions, including the Climate Action Plan. We're going to cancel the Paris Climate Agreement and stop all payments of U.S. tax dollars to UN global warming programs. Well, imagine if you're sitting back as the United Nations and you hear that. That's the last guy you want to be in office, because I'm trying to establish a world governing body. I'm the United Nations. And I don't want a guy who's against talking about defunding my global warming programs as the President of the United States. So we're going to make him out to be some kind of a demon, and everything he does, it's just, he can't do anything right. If he blinks the right way, he's just got a devil on his back. That's what's going on right now. There's been a big push, Donald Trump said, to develop alternative forms of energy, so-called green energy, from renewable sources. That's a big mistake. To begin with, the whole push for renewable energy is being driven by the wrong motivation. The mistaken belief that global climate change is being caused by carbon emissions. If you don't buy that, and I don't, then what we really have is just an expensive way of making tree huggers feel good about themselves. I didn't say that, Donald Trump did. So you don't have to call me and say, Dave, you're on the tree huggers. I didn't. Donald Trump said that. I'm just quoting from him. And so you can see that at the end, which this is one of the huge things about the United Nations, is wealth redistribution. Because remember, from its inception, it was created to be a socialistic one world governing body. Socialism, you study their platforms, and it's about wealth redistribution, and wealth redistribution. So they got to have a scheme that they come up with to redistribute the wealth of the world. What is that? We'll scare everybody into thinking global warming, climate change is happening and that they're causing it, and we need to tax them and redistribute the wealth from developed nations to underdeveloped nations. And then you have the President of the United States that just got elected November 8th, 2016, that says, nah, we're not going to do that, and we're going to defund the money that's going towards this. And they have been screaming to high heaven ever since. And we feel here in America some of that blowback from that, because there are people here in the United States that absolutely believe that. Now, on top of that, he recently just said he's going to axe NAFTA, or there's a potential for it. So in a recent speech in Arizona, President Trump stated, I think we'll probably end up terminating NAFTA at some point. Well, when the globalists heard that, they can't believe it, because they worked forever to try and get NAFTA passed. NAFTA is just one of the many efforts towards globalization and a world government. The New American reports that another reason not to take claims by some proponents of NAFTA, CAFTA, and FTAA seriously when they assert that these agreements won't compromise U.S. national sovereignty is that many of the architects of these trade agreements have admitted from the beginning that their intent is to expand NAFTA into a European style, or the European Union style, superstate in the Western Hemisphere. For instance, when NAFTA became a serious proposal in the 90s, Dr. M. Dalal Baer suggested in the fall of 1991, in the edition of Foreign Affairs, which many of you will know, that's the journal of the Council on Foreign Relations, that NAFTA should eventually, now this is what we're talking about here, NAFTA should eventually evolve into a European Union style superstate, leading into a world government. Now, or the process of globalization, which is pointing us towards a world governing body. But it's free trade, right? So you heard the term free trade. No, that's wrong. And here's why. The free trade rhetoric is phony when it comes to NAFTA. The world government, really, accusations are real. Congressman Ron Paul, most of you know him obviously, especially if you're here in Texas or really in the United States, he stated this, that CAFTA and other international trade agreements do not represent free trade at all. Free trade occurs in the absence of government interference in the flow of goods, and while CAFTA represents more government in the form of an international body, it is absurd to believe that CAFTA and other trade agreements do not diminish American sovereignty. When we grant quasi-governmental international bodies the power to make decisions about American trade rules, so in other words, we allow a world governing body to make decisions about our trade rules, what's going to happen? We will lose sovereignty, plain and simple. This is Ron Paul. So Europeans were then fooled by the same, they've been fooled by the same deceit in past decades. Americans who really want to keep the United States as an independent sovereign nation need to pressure their congressmen to drop these agreements. If the agreements pass, the path will be paved that leads the United States first into a Western hemispheric government and then into a world government under the auspices of the United Nations. And we will lose the freedoms protected by the U.S. Constitution. Now, Donald Trump just made a statement that we'll probably somehow axe NAFTA before very long. So imagine if you're trying, would this cause a stir among the global elites? Should President Trump axe NAFTA? Absolutely. They're looking at him and they're saying, do what? We've tried all these years to build this and get the United States and Canada and Mexico working together on what we call free trade, but yet we're going to dictate the different little nuances of it, and we're going to get them to yield up their sovereignty, because when you take on more control, you yield up sovereignty. It doesn't work where you keep all your sovereignty, but yet you take on more control. It doesn't work like that. You've got to yield up sovereignty to bring on more control and regulation. And Ron Paul specifically knew that. So at the end of the day, and I've got so much more, the Washington establishment fighting President Trump on Obamacare, you realize that John McCain, a Republican, is the one that voted no, that broke the back of that, the repeal and replace. You understand? So it's not just all the Democrats, there are Republicans who are in bed with them too. So at the end of the day, you feel the blowback. What's going on with the turmoil here in the United States? If you look at it from the big picture, there's people that in the United States that want to pull us into a world government, people in the United States that are trying to pull us out of it, and there's a conflict, and you can feel it in the fiber of our nation. And folks, let me tell you, this could be the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Why? Because we, America, is not mentioned in the world governing body in the end time. The eagle's wings are not mentioned in Revelation chapter 13, verse 1 through 8.